Hello, my friends. Welcome to another awesome Friday edition of the Celebrity Chat of Back to Me. This week is Rusti L Lehay, and Rusti is super interesting. She's a creative writing instructor, she's a coach, she's an intuitive, and we're talking about a lot of things, obviously, but interestingly about autonomy and self and being able to know what is best for you and then taking action towards it. It's going to be an awesome chat. So stay tuned. Give me a like, give me a review, would be awesome. I will talk to you soon. Take care. Hi, my friends. Welcome. This is the Back to Me podcast, and this is Heather, and I am super excited that you're here. You are going to hear some tips and some tricks and some ideas to help you live your happiest and healthiest self. I call it Back to Me because when you are taking care of yourself, back to me, then you can take better care of others, and we can all make the world a better place. This is Wellness Your Way, and I am super happy that you're here. And I am actually super excited. So, hello, my friends. How are you? I hope you're having the most outstanding day ever so far in this lifetime. This is Heather. This is the Back to Me podcast. And you already know that the Friday edition is my favorite edition because I get to talk to some super amazing people, celebrities, and they're celebrities in my world because they're really interesting and I always learn something and take something away. And my intention, of course, is to help you find something that you can learn and take away. And today, my super awesome celebrity is Rusti L Lehay. Hello, my friend.
Hello. I love the way you introduce your show and that you're having the most astounding day. It reminds me of one of
Yeah.
my favorite quotes that I use when I give cards to people is, may the saddest day of your future be like the happiest day of your past.
Oh, you got to think about that one for a minute. Say, oh, I
Yeah.
like quotes that make you pause.
Well, I have a few on the top of my head.
Of course you do. And because you are writing coach and empathic editor, Rusty. So
Mhm.
tell me, so I know we were going to talk about a whole bunch of things today, but so people get a sense of who you are, like as much as you want to tell us about who you are and what you do and maybe why. How did you get into it? And that might lead us into the autonomy question even.
Right, it might, it might. Writing has always been a part of my life ever since my crazy brother-in-law took his wife and his three children and his sister-in-law, me, 10 years old at the time, and his mother-in-law to Mexico on a road trip from Alberta, Canada.
Whoa.
And I picked up all these pen pals along the way because every time we got to the campground, I would escape the three nephews, the three boys, and try to find a girl to play with. And I gathered addresses, and then back home, I would be belly down in the farmhouse floor asking my mother, what do I write? And she would guide me into details, the five senses, and using those in a letter. And especially writing about the goslings is the best way to describe it because the way they feel, the way they sound, the way that I had to tuck them into wool socks and close up the top with the clothespin at the end of the evening so that they wouldn't be peep, peep, peeping all night long after I fed them. And then teaching them how to drink water because they didn't have their parents to learn from. And this was only because sometimes they would hatch too early in the spring or the mother goose couldn't keep them warm if snowstorms came, late snowstorms came. So it was my job to feed them milk-soaked bread and to teach them how to drink, to put their beaks in the bills in the water dish and then turn them right side up really quick so that they could learn how to drink by gravity. And that was how she taught me to write. Talk about how they feel. Talk about how their gullet feels when it's full and you know you can't feed them anymore. Tell people how you teach them how to drink, how they follow you everywhere, and you can fool them just for a little bit by stepping on a stool and over, and they'll peek their long necks around over the stool and see where I'm going because they imprinted on me.
That is so not what I expected.
But
I
it
didn't
became
know that about goslings either.
no, but it became my life-saving device too later on to write about things that happened in the dark, to write about things that weren't right, to write about things that should happen to no girl child, no child ever, and to keep those hidden and secret and but a place to make sense of things that didn't make sense
And
in this.
writing does really help you make sense of things, right?
It does.
Um, and I know some people try to work everything out in their head, but really, when you get it down on paper, even if you don't know what you're writing, it just feels like it becomes so much more clear.
Yes, it
Not
does.
not that everybody has to write a book or anything, but it just helps you sort through things.
Hmm.
And typing isn't the same. What do you think of that?
No, typing is not the same. There is something that happens in the brain when we write by hand. There's a couple of things. And one of my favorite people to quote about that is Dr. Caroline Leaf, who appears on Tom Bilyeu's YouTube show, Impact Theory. And she talks exactly what happens in the brain. It's about 37 minutes in that talk, if you wanted to skip to that part. But she talks about how the vibrations of the pen and the paper and the drug chemicals that happen when we write by hand, and how the vibration of the pen and the paper calm the parasympathetic nervous system, and that we get this connection, things that happen when we write by hand. And for people who find that uncomfortable to write by hand, like I even have a harder time these days too with an injury that I had to my wrist, but I've learned different ways to hold the pen and then writing that first draft by hand and then revising in the computer. There are times when I can write something straight out of my head on the computer. So I think that we can do both. But there's something else that happens when we write by hand, a connection that the muse plays with us. When we show up, the muse shows up. And
Right.
there's realizations. I like to say the pen is mightier than the therapist.
Which is why journaling is so amazing, right?
Mm, yes.
And I know there are different kinds of learners. You know, there's people process information differently, but we all have bodies.
Mhm.
And I think the pen helps us. I mean, 18 years a yoga teacher, I'm going to be a bit biased, but um, connecting like this brain that carries around and thinks it's in charge, somehow reconnecting it with the body. The pen is such a good way to do it, right? That writing. So your brain is there, your body is engaged, you're breathing, hopefully.
Breathing, yes, we know how important that is. I find
Right.
sometimes when I'm writing, when I'm really stressed, I will actually be holding my breath and I let it out and I take a breath and I have to be purposeful with taking
Wow.
my breath to write. And it hasn't been like that for quite some time, but there was a relationship where I wrote myself out of it. And I wrote myself out of it by doing morning pages and keeping those private, and by writing emails to two women friends so that I could keep aware about the too good to leave, too bad to stay aspects. It's
I
really
think,
important.
yeah, I think that's when we started talking autonomy, one of the last conversations we had, how I thought it was really interesting. You talked about how it helped that relationship helped you in some ways, and it helped you create that discipline, I think you called it, of your morning pages, but also all that writing made you realize something else. I don't wanna put words in your mouth.
Yeah, no, it definitely did because the relationship was um it had its healthy points and he was a wonderful man in many ways, but he had a view of relationships having to be this way. His parents had never really spent a night apart, I think, and then he expected that of us. And at the beginning, here we're going to go back to the Goslings, which I don't think I've ever done before, but it's back to the Goslings in that I actually had a poem somewhere that, feed me and give me my love language, words of praise, and I'll follow you anywhere type thing. And so I imprinted on him, and he was very much the same as my mother. My father died when I was 7. And so, in between men, where I learned the serial monogamy from very well, my mother would need all of me. And this man needed all of me. And he really needed to speak to someone like Esther Perel If any of you know Esther Perel's work out there about how it takes a village to maintain and keep a relationship healthy. And he believed that we should be everything to each other. And so we spent hardly no time apart. Um,
Wow.
I never had to ask him, where was he or where have you been? Like some women might have to ask sometimes, because he was just there. And even when he had this one night a week cleaning job at a place that I had, found for him because I was doing temp work, and that was my only time away. And after the breast cancer and not working outside the home, it was my world really closed up. But then doing a qigong weekend of exercise because he believed that that was good for me to recover from. It was the last thing that he did that I really wanted to do. And it was all weekend long, him moving his body and being physical in the presence of other people. That was just so difficult for him.
Wow.
And that night when he was morose, I said, we've got to go for a walk. We've got to go for a walk. And out on the walk, he said, when we get off the grid and out in the country, we're not going to give our forwarding address to anyone. And part of me went, because ever since the diagnosis in my breast, I had been able to call the shots of what our relationship would look like and what activities, because it was so frightening to him. And I trusted my body completely. I was confused where it came from. And later,
Right.
I read Gabor Mate's book, When the Body Says No, The Hidden Cost of Stress. And he calls breast cancer the good girl disease. I was a good girl for your
Oh,
mother. I never talked back to her. I was there and I was her surrogate partner type thing when she didn't have somebody in her life. And this man was very much like my mother, very similar in personality, very similar outlook towards life. And it was the relationship that helped me find those missing pieces of myself so I could become separate from my mother. And when she died 2 years after the breast cancer, and I was writing now for months with those two friends, to keep that. And the only time I had during the day that was mine and mine alone, for sure, guaranteed, was the 30 minutes he skipped, because he never stopped skipping. Once that rope started hitting the floor, I knew it was 30 minutes that he wasn't going to come through the door and say, what are you writing? Or what are you working on? Or I just had this thought. And that was the moment that I realized I can't stay in this relationship. My world is going to close down again and I need out. And
well, and I mean, the last 2 years, like uh, you threw in the breast cancer. They're like, what? Breast cancer? We'll
I'm
come back to
surprised.
that in a second. But the like the past 2 years have just shown us so much how, yes, you need a village to have a relationship, but we are social beings, and our health comes from relationships and connection and the good and the bad of all of it. I mean, it's all, you know, not everything is unicorns and rainbows, but I would have been petrified if he said that we were going to go into the woods and never. I'd be like, we're not hermits. I need to talk to people. What do you mean I can't talk? It would be almost like prison, right? It would be solitary confinement, and
Yeah,
that would be so frightening.
yeah. And yet there was this other aspect too, is that there's a part of me that really does like solitude and quiet. And every artist, no matter what you're creating, does need that to a certain degree. I mean, my nephew, who's a roofer, would say that, I can be pounding nails and shingles, take a phone call and go right back to pounding nails and shingles. But a creative, there is studies and statistics out there that it takes us a full 20 to 30 minutes to get back in our flow when we're in the midst of
Oh my
creating
gosh,
something
that's
in
so
interrupt.
true.
And so
I
the quiet that I had with him was very productive to create. And I wrote over 3,000 poems in that relationship and lots of prose pieces. But the 2 years of where I had things that he was so scared to, do anything that wasn't for my health and my recovery. But once he was confident, once we did this anti-malignant anti-serum test with dry ice and spinning blood in a different kind of way in a centrifuge and sending it off to Boston, that came back as if I'd never had cancer at all, he started to want to go back into that pumpkin shell. and my world was just really closing up and I couldn't stay. And then when I got the call about my mother's dying, that was the last thing that freed me up, because I wanted to be connected to my family, but I'd made this silly and ridiculous and regretful promise to him out of some kind of subtle pressure that, your family didn't protect you from the abuse, they don't deserve you. And he would say these things subtly, but that was the overt thing. And
Right.
so I made some statement that I wasn't going to go to my mother's funeral, you're right, type thing. And it was not that simple, it was much more subtle and subconscious. But I wanted to go see my sister and have our own celebration of life for my mother, the one sister that I kept on wanting and hoping that she would find me, that she would see in the paper, oh, Rusti Lehay's reading poetry, which he would come along, drag himself out there and hate it while he was there, and then say things that he liked later at home, type thing. And I had given up my car. Also, don't ever do that. Don't give up your one means of communication or uh, commuting ability.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to meet her at this one place. And his mother and father lived upstairs. We lived in the basement suite that we'd renovated for us. In fact, he'd never moved out from his parents' home ever. He just moved into the basement with me. And I said that occasionally, the one thing that I fought for near the end was to go and be with my poetry group. And he had never, ever updated me that he could see that it benefited me. So every time I was at that poetry group, when 3:30 came and I knew he was expecting me to start home, I was like trying to find a break in the conversation, and it ruined the flow of those moments you can get into with women and the creative spirit. And I never got an update from him that he could see that it benefited me. I think he was
Right.
afraid that if I had that one thing, I'd want more and more and more, because there was fear and stuff for him. So when I said that, may I borrow the car to go see my sister? And his parents, his mother said, well, why didn't you have her here for tea? And this was the moment that I just I didn't know where it came from, Heather. I said in the moment, very calmly, nothing derogatory in my voice, just said, if you're not okay with me borrowing the car for this, I'll rent one. And they backtracked and they said, oh, no, 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 it's okay. It's okay. It's okay. Because I think they saw in that mirror that, wow, they were really holding in. And I think they wanted, at the beginning of the relationship, all of them wanted some more of that social butterfly that I was at the beginning. And then slowly it just closed up and closed up and closed up more and more. And so I did
It's
go.
like you went into a reverse cocoon, right?
Yes,
Instead of breaking out of it, you closed yourself into it.
yes, I've never thought of it that way, Heather. Thank you. It was. I'll have to write a poem on that and share it with you.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
You climbed back in and then you had to find your way back out again.
I did. Hmm.
And do you think the breast cancer helped you shift a perspective on that? Or what?
I think it did, because the more that I wrote during some of those private times to the two women that I was writing to, because I was I'd gotten into the habit of sharing everything that I wrote with him, all the poetry and everything. So I'd gotten into that habit. So the private writing that I was able to do while he was skipping to the two women friends, I was exploring all of this. Too good to leave, too bad to stay. Why did the breast cancer appear in my breast anyway? Because we were eating organic. We were eating high fiber, low fat, although we know better things about that now. We were eating the heavier meal at lunchtime and a light meal at supper time. I worked out 7 days a week, light days on the weekend, harder days, 3 days of the week was cardio and, weights. And then 2 days of the weekdays were, some cardio and some stretching. And there was stretching every day. By all rights and purposes, I should have been very healthy.
Right.
And reading Gabor Mate's book about the mental, emotional aspects of illness, I started writing in there, and I have a piece all about hair, yes, down there. And lost it all. I mean, losing your eyebrows and your nostril hair is just wow, it's crazy. And I wrote in there about how it was a wake up call into that I needed to stop being the good girl and live for me and take care of my own dreams and agendas and speak up for me. So at the very end of that relationship, and men sense this, they sense this when there's somebody that's leaving the relationship and the other one needs it more. So not just men, but when somebody senses the other person is starting to withdraw, he would sit on the exercise carpet that he'd roll out to skip, and then we both stretched on, took turns stretching on. And he asked me, what do I need? And I said, I need time alone. And I repeated it like a broken record. And I said, take your parents to Jasper. I mean, your mom had time by herself because your dad would take your grandma to Jasper, and she had time. As women, we need time alone in our spaces too. And some women need that more than others, that quiet and that solitude to really know ourselves. And the less time that I had by myself, the less I knew myself. But the cancer gave me more of that awareness that I needed to spend some time in here that was private, that was just mine and mine alone.
Right. I mean, we generalize and say women, but women do tend to be the caregivers, the good girls, the don't say no, look after everyone. And you find you don't often, especially if you, I mean, I talk about overwhelmed overachievers. If you are doing all the doings, then when do you have that time for yourself and the creative space, especially? So, not to say that everybody has to be a poet or an artist, but even just a creative, and all of life can be creative. Like you can
Mm-hmm.
be a creative mother. I mean, but
Yes.
you need some brain space. You need some of that quiet space. I mean, I actually rent an art studio out of our home so that I can go there and shut the door. And it takes me about a half an hour before I can even start painting because I need to, I don't know what it is. I was just
Yeah.
thought I was procrastinating, but you've just validated the fact that I need time to figure out what I'm doing. But
Mm-hmm.
it is, have you heard of the book, Do Less, Be More?
No, I haven't.
Ooh, you might want to check that
Ooh,
one. It
I like
talks
that.
about they had people in brain scan machines, I think it was an MRI machine, while they were doing tasks to watch which part of the brain's fired. And they found this by accident. They just happened to leave the machines on when they weren't doing anything. They were just sitting, waiting. And they realized that different parts of the brain lit up when they weren't task solving, and that
Mm,
it connected more parts of the brain. So allowing you that space where you're not fixing, helping, working, thinking, all of those like very directed ways of thinking. It's almost,
mhm,
I always think of it as a daydreaming kind of brain that allows your brain to actually develop in some ways, like make connections you wouldn't have thought of, be that creative space, come up with solutions. One of the things they quoted was the lady who wrote Harry Potter.
Oh, J.K. Rowling.
Yeah. Okay. That's my stroke coming in. I can't remember names of things. Um, she came up with the Harry Potter sitting on the train, staring at the window, thinking about nothing,
Mhm.
apparently. So space.
Yeah.
So it's almost like, so I always talk about balance. We need a balance, right? We need people to engage and to be part of community. And they've done studies where the where the places where they have the most centenarians, is that the word? People
Yes,
over 100.
over
Part of
100.
part
Yeah,
of their health is they're very community involved. But you do need your own autonomy and space, right? You do need to be your own person and
absolutely.
claim claim your responsibility for yourself. Sometimes that's hard.
It is hard. And, there was, after that relationship ended, my sister made me, revisit it so that I would then take care of all those loose ends. Because otherwise, she knew as a life coach that I would be bringing some of that and reenacting that with her if I didn't solve it with him. And she said, go and yell at him. You never spoke back to him. You never spoke up to him and said, there's another way to see the world. There's another way to do relationships. And he didn't like that much. I can tell you that.
She made you yell at him in real life?
In real life, she said, like, revisit the relationship, give him another try, but do things your way. And he would complain, "We're doing everything your way now." And I shot back, "We did it your way for 9 years." So it's my turn type
You
thing.
gave it a good old try. And
Yeah.
I asked that because I've done work where relationships that were unresolved and kind of dangling dangling ends, I resolved them by having those conversations, but it was not in real life.
Yeah.
It was I did it with with my therapist. It was like I took on both roles. That's an interesting tactic as well. Tactic, probably not the right word, but switching roles and having that conversation with yourself. You get
Mhm.
an interesting brain shift in perspective, but you do also get your closure. Like
Yes.
closure is like, this is who I want to be in my life, and this is how I see the world. I would
Hmm.
like to understand the way you see the world, but we don't have to agree.
Yes, I have a story about that, Heather,
Ooh,
about
yes.
they did that with my first major relationship, which was a marriage, which actually I can honestly say I've never been married because the church annulled it. So they
Oh,
didn't agree with the marriage. But I had been angry at him too. I mean, I've spent too many years of my life angry, Heather. And let me tell you, anger porn blocks us in our creative energies. It blocks us from finding our passions. It blocks us from stepping into our power. And only once I really, really routed out and excavated all that anger and all that victim language and became accountable for everything, and that I had soul contracts with all these relationships, was I able to step into my power in my late 50s. And that's too late. I don't wish that for anyone. So, one of the things that I did that really turned the tide for me was with my son's father, that had begun with a rape. And then my mother gave him her engagement ring off her finger. She loved him and said, "Here, make it legal." So I never had a proposal to say no to.
oh my
And
Lord.
it was only a couple of years ago, with my journal sitting right there. I looked at it, that I wrote, and I was writing in his tone of voice. And I start the piece out by saying, "Finally, you are asking questions about what made me into the monster of your bedroom experiences." And I continued on in his voice, writing it from his point of view. And I had realizations that I had never thought of about his pain and his reality, and what possibly drove him to be the way that he was with me, and how much I never saw from his side. And it was incredibly healing to see that he may have been so totally stuck in his reality that I could only see mine, he could only see his, and we never discussed some things like his daughter dying in our car accident when I was driving. We never discussed
Oh,
that, ever.
that's
Other than, the court case that absolved us of responsibility, because there was this yellow truck that cut me off when he was too drunk to drive and I was an inexperienced driver. And I crossed the meridian into the oncoming traffic. And I can still remember that blue Oldsmobile and that steel drill driving right into our car broadside.
right.
And never seeing his daughter again. So the man had a lot of pain and a lot of issues. And being 15 years older than me, he came from a generation of men that certainly have none of the tools that some of the men are happily accessing now, to much, betterment for themselves. None of those avenues for him.
Right. It was,
Mm.
I always think of the very British keep calm and carry on.
Yeah.
Men were, and to some extent, some of them still are very, you have to be tough. Boys
Hmm.
don't cry. I mean,
Mm.
as much as girls are polite and always say yes, boys don't cry.
No, do
Right.
you know that it's easier for men to say to their friends that they have HIV or that they're gay than to say, "I'm depressed"?
Wow.
Isn't that incredibly sad?
That is sad.
Oh, yeah.
It keeps you from um, not being able to express what's going on for you,
Yeah.
keeps you from being able to figure out how to get out of it, right?
Mhm.
Keeps you from accessing assistance. And I go back to community again. I mean,
No.
when I mean, I don't know, but when I was in the hospital, it was actually a bit slightly overwhelming, because I let my husband knew, and he let some of my good friends know, and that I was in the hospital, and one of them messaged me and she said, "Can I tell people?" I said, "Of course you can tell people. I live my life on social media." And she
Mhm.
told everybody, even people she didn't know. And so I started, this flood of messages came into me at the hospital, and you don't realize how important that is until it comes.
Yeah.
Like, because of COVID, I was alone in the emergency room for
Mm.
3 days,
Oh,
and
wow.
that was just
Mm.
so sustaining and
Mm.
energizing and hopeful and fulfilling, knowing that everybody was thinking of me, right?
Beautiful.
Right?
Yes. Mhm.
And I have one of my very well, my very first long-term relationship was, there's some parallels to yours. And you don't realize how isolated you are until you think, how how did this happen? How did you not have the ability to choose for yourself, or make your own decisions, or decide to go to the movie without
Mm.
having to ask? So interesting. Hooray for us for standing up for ourselves, right? Hooray for us.
Exactly.
You
Mhm.
can do it.
Yes. You must do it. You can do it.
You can do it. And
Mhm.
and that's not to say, I mean, there's bumps in all relationships,
Oh, there are, for sure.
right? Oh, even, marriages made in heaven, relationships made in heaven, there's bumps along the way, but
Mhm.
it's the long-term health of the partners. I mean, my partner and I agreed to support each other. Part of our vows were to support each other in our emotional, physical, spiritual growth, in our growth, in whatever form that took. Even if it
Beautiful.
meant even if it meant that we grew in different directions, we would fully support each other. Now, hooray for me that it's we've actually been growing in the same direction, but
Yes.
we consciously made that decision to
Mhm.
try to support each other in what we were in all of our endeavors, which
Mhm.
I think I
It's
wish
beautiful.
that I wish that for everyone, really.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I'm happy single now, but I do occasionally write in my journal, what might it be like? What would it look like if I wanted to be in a relationship? And so I have a couple friend, actually I have a few couples. I have Samuel and Wei Lee as an example, Betty and Les as an example, Paul and Cynthia as an example. And Paul and Cynthia, they are lovely. They've been my top example for a long time. And when their longtime cat died, their lovely pet named Daisy, and Cynthia was totally distraught, and Paul grieved but was ready to move on earlier than Cynthia. And after like a lifetime of relationship of raising their girls together in similar ways, they're traveling together. The girls one time asked, "Why don't we have the new car or the new house like so and so?" And the parents would both say, "Do you want to go to Spain and skiing on vacations, or do you want the new car and the house?" "No, no, we want to go to Spain and big skiing and stuff." Like, okay, I get it, I get it. They were so joined at the hip with the way that they raised their girls and the way that they traveled and adventured and then, worked together at home. It was awesome. And then he called me and he said, "I don't know what to do. She just won't come out of this." So, like you said, even relationships made in heaven, they have their bumpy spots, but they got through it because they had that strong foundation. And I wish what they have and what works for each person out there, because there are relationships that might look dysfunctional to you and me. I mean, this man and I, we look so functional to people outside that they were shocked when I left,
Right?
absolutely shocked. So it can look dysfunctional to us, what might be functional for them, or it can look functional to us, what's totally dysfunctional for one of them.
And you
Or
can never tell from the outside what a
no,
relationship actually
no,
is.
no,
And and I think one of the biggest things that I have discovered, having several long-term relationships
Mm-hmm.
is if you don't have conversations about, you can, like, if the conversations are always the good stuff, then you're missing a huge chunk of what's going on. Being okay to have a conversation about, this upset me, without blaming. I mean, finding a way to have a communication about things that you need without um, forcing, I guess, them to change. Just like, this is what I need. Let's have a conversation about it. Is there, and what do you need? And have them be comfortable talking about what they need, and um, being okay to say, you know, this upset me. I'm not, and I'll always say, I'm not mad at you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're an odd couple. We went through all of the what if conversations when we first started dating, and how we would communicate when things were upsetting us, and we've given each other permission to say when somebody's getting on our nerves. So, but we always preface it with, um, this doesn't we always know this doesn't change our feelings about each other, but right now you're really pissing me off. Like,
That's healthy, Heather. Healthy.
right.
Yes.
And then we might go apart because we like our alone time, and then we'll come back together and talk about it.
Did you know that
Right.
alone time is actually considered a sixth love languages? Like there's the five love languages of acts of service and gifts and touch and words of affirmation and quality time. And somebody wrote a really neat article on Medium about the sixth love language that needs to be named as alone time. And we need that. And also what my sister teaches too, and some of her couple coaching, when they're trying to avoid conflict, like I did, that was one of my main things that got me into trouble, is I'd avoid conflict at all costs, which meant I blended and merged to give up my own agenda to keep the peace.
Right.
But some of that friction that can come from having a difference of opinion actually gives a whole lot of zest to what happens in the bedroom.
Right. Don't they call that makeup sex?
They call that makeup sex, sure, you can call it that. But I think that it's if we were all the same all the time, that deadens things too, and
Boring.
steals some of the energy that can come from having some differences. And having some alone time and separate activities or passions means you're bringing something new and fresh back to the relationship all the time.
Right. Yeah, that's awesome. And I'm kind of laughing because we were talking about sex earlier. What is your talk called that you're
Oh,
giving?
one of the workshops I have coming up, because I have writers' lounges every month on the second Saturday, and I have stage retreats every second month, on usually the third weekend, sometimes the fourth if there's 5 weekends. But there's Global Orgasm Day on July 30th. And in
That's it.
honor of that, I have a workshop writing erotic writing for women. And if you think about it, Global Orgasm Day, there's an acronym there. And what do we sometimes say? Oh God, oh God, oh God, I'm so so it's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be for women, erotic writing for women, and we're going to start off gentle and slow, and just writing some things that will get us into the mode. And I have a couple of writers that are very interested in coming, that are very vocal and verbal about sharing. One woman is one. She wrote 2 books during the 2 years plus that I've been doing the workshops, and she published 2 books during those 2 years. So you get a lot done
Wow.
there. And she is now writing as my lover, and so she's looking forward to this day, this workshop.
So first of all, I had no idea there was a Global Orgasm Day, which
Neither did
is
I.
so funny because when I teach my yoga and my yoga Tai Chi fusion classes, and I always start the class with, today's made up holiday is, and I
We're
never
gonna have
knew.
such fun on July 30th. You better teach extra classes that day to have us a lot of fun.
I know. I have to put that in my calendar. So, Dad, if you're watching, don't listen to that class. And and it's also interesting. So because I've been to those uh parties with the Aren't We Naughty parties. We used to go to Avon parties where we did makeup. We went to Tupperware parties where we got Tupperware that burped. Now we go to sex toy parties where
Yes, I
you drink wine and they show you the latest technology. And
know. Mhm.
I wonder, so people get quite titillated in those, obviously. You get a little wine flowing and a bunch of ladies in a room with battery operated devices, and there's lots of laughter. But it would be very different to be in a writing workshop about it, because um, it's almost more personal, isn't it? Because it's
Yeah, it
something
is.
coming out of you, like it's your voice speaking something.
Mhm. Well, one of the things I've got to do is like to do something totally fantastical that's not possible in this realm where we live. Like, you're on some other world, and, there's three blue moons and two suns, and there's, that dusk is what it is all the time. There's never too dark, and you've got all this extra time to play. And there could be the places that you can go in, that it's like walking through Jello, or, like something that's just totally way out there. And so to work your way into doing it in something that this isn't real at all, but hey, it could be really fun to imagine certain things.
Right. It's like one of those where do they make outer space porn? I don't know. I've never.
I'm not sure either, but we might create some on July 30th for fun to,
Right.
get us a little bit, from there. Mhm.
And you're speaking in a summit as well, aren't you?
I
Or
did
is that
speak
the
in a summit this Tuesday this week about how writing can your erotic self, because I I hadn't ever dealt with a childhood sexual abuse. And so that was then, combine that then with that my son's father, the one marriage, long-term relationship I had, that it began with a date rape type scenario where my mother said, "You made your bed, now lie in it."
Oh
And
Lord.
never talking about that was really making every sexual encounter a repeat of me being a victim. And so writing compassion into the past, seeing other ways to see things, to do your healing, whether you do it through painting, whether you do it through pounding a pillow, whether you do it through, like Arthur Yanoff's primal scream type therapy, or Jungian, however you do it, writing is used, or an art medium is used in so many healing modalities, that it can be freeing and turn things around for you. Because you say those best years of a woman's life, like sexually, miss those totally. With, not having been aware of all the things that I needed to heal, and how to heal them at
Right.
a deep, deep, deep cellular level.
And that doesn't mean you can't enjoy the later years, you know,
No. Mm,
right?
mm-mm.
Um, and who says what the best years are? Probably some male scientist guy. Like, come on,
Probably. Probably. One of those guys, yeah.
right? But I apologize. I thought your summit was coming, but it's past. But that's
Yeah.
okay. There'll be
Mm,
more. I know you're going to have beyond more summits coming up, right?
mhm.
Um, and we will make sure that we stay tuned on those things.
Oh,
Um,
thank you.
the So interesting. So I wanted to touch a little bit on your breast cancer, because we talked about that once previously. Um, how you took control of it to heal yourself,
I did. I did.
right?
Much to my surgeon's chagrin. He was so, this is putting it mildly, he was very irritated with me, because I had talked to my naturopath and my traditional Chinese medicine doctor and my chiropractor. And I had read and read and read, and then I had my friends do reading for me. And the conclusion that I came to was that I could recover from chemotherapy as if I'd never had it. So my hair is bone straight again after chemotherapy. It was curly like an afro. And I could recover from that. And I did the surgery, but with the surgeon, I had to promise that I was going to do radiation in order to have a lumpectomy. Otherwise, he wanted me to have a mastectomy. And he knew that I didn't want a mastectomy, and he knew that I wasn't comfortable with radiation. he made me promise in the day of surgery. He let me decide the day of surgery, provided I had the 4 dots. So I have a tattoo and a tattoo here, and I have a tattoo up here and a little tattoo down here. The 4 dots so that they could aim the radiation, the sunny side of the atom, where they felt they needed to do it, on this part of my right breast.
Right.
And on the day of surgery, I out and out lied. I signed the paper saying, yes, I'll do radiation. I want the lumpectomy, knowing full well I wasn't going to do it. So at the first checkup, he said, have you booked your first radiation? I said, I'm not going to. And he just about lost it. And I said, this is my body. And what I'd also done, because I'm a person that likes to have proof and likes to go and seek answers and confirmation of what I, thinking and what I want to do, that I had asked my whole circle of friends and people by email, do they know anybody that is outside of the local provincial healthcare system that would be willing to look at my records, medical records, and verify what I'm feeling is right for my body? Turns out that my statistics professor from university, Miss Marie Saffron, had a sister-in-law, no, I had a brother-in-law whose sister-in-law was an oncologist, a radiation oncologist. And she looked at my records and she said, they're being overly careful. You don't need radiation. And yeah, so I blithely and comfortably said, nope, not doing it. So I
It is
jumped off.
interesting.
Yeah, sorry.
I feel sometimes like because I'm in the medical system, we're supposed to, as well as a massage therapist. I mean, I'm still obligated under the medical guidelines. You have to ask for consent to do things. But the stories that I hear often is, and I mean, I love Western medicine. I love my doctor friends, but you will get doctors who they're not asking you for consent. They're telling you that you're going to consent, which is different.
Yes.
I had a client for a while who they wanted to biopsy, and she said no. She said she had all of the information. She had all of the research that showed that biopsying this particular cancer would cause more problems than just removing it. And she even paid, she sent her information to, I think, Boston, like some big giant medical conglomerate type. And they said, yes, don't biopsy it. And the doctor was so mad at her, and he wanted to biopsy it. And she said, no, you're just going to take it out. And that's probably what saved her life. I mean,
wow. And can I add to that? Because we need to do our own research. We need to become comfortable with our decisions and not just what the doctors tell us, because the doctors are right. I agree that they're perfect there for a reason, for several things. But when I first discovered the lump, and I went to the doctor, and she said, it's probably just a fibroadenoma. We'll send you for a mammogram and an ultrasound, and we'll see what happens from there. Now, I did research and saying, a fibroadenoma, what's that? And it's kind of nicknamed breast mouse because it moves around, whereas cancer usually attaches. And so it was very movable. And so they were just calling it like a cystic, like fibroadenoma. But I read about fibroadenomas in the big book that Every Woman's Health, Every Woman's Body, I can't remember the title exact right now. And they said, insist on a biopsy, a needle biopsy, because they can't tell by ultrasound and a mammogram. And so my case was totally opposite of your client. And
right.
I went to mammogram on the ultrasound, and they said, oh yeah, it's a fibroadenoma. Your doctor's right. You can go home now. And I insisted on the needle biopsy. Remember, when I got my records, I had to fight for my records to send into the radiation oncologist in Colorado. And it said in my records that we had to do a needle biopsy to ease the patient's fears. Interesting. I was told that that was what I needed to do. And so they were all ready to send me home, and I insisted on the needle biopsy. It came back malignant, and they wanted to give me the harshest chemotherapy there was, because it was an aggressive, by their standards from the needle biopsy, an aggressive form of breast cancer.
Wow.
And they would have sent me home saying, oh, it's a fibroadenoma.
Right.
We are all different. And what's right for me is not necessarily right for you.
And the woman I spoke of, it wasn't breast cancer, actually. It was something with her kidneys. So
Yeah.
it was something entirely different. But
Mhm.
it is true. I mean, we do have access to a lot of information now, and we can do a lot of our own research.
Mhm.
Make sure you use reputable sites to do your research,
Yeah.
because there is a lot of
Mm.
alternative facts out there right now. I'll call them.
Oh, I know. I had to find, if I was going to go with something, I had to find it in at least 3 different places. I had to do the research as to what was funding the research behind it, because like Nabisco shredded wheat has funded the study that fiber is good for you. Do you think they
Oh
have
my
an
god.
think they have an agenda? So like for me to believe in something and to embrace it and then to practice it was that I had to find it from 3 or 4 different places. And so when I found out that iodine is a really good breast cancer preventative, I researched it and found it from Dr. David Derry, a Canadian medical researcher, in his book Breast Cancer and Iodine. I found it from Jane Plant, who had breast cancer and metastatic breast cancer for the fifth time, in her book Your Life is in Your Own Hands, and she was from the UK. And I found it in Robert Cohen's book, Milk the Deadly Poison. He talked about it in there. And then I found it in a research study, that one of the things they talk about, and all of these studies linked and correlated and cross-referenced, and I couldn't find agendas in any of them. So that's where I made some of my decisions about, yes, iodine is now going to be a very special part of my regimen, with kelp and iodine, and making sure that I have, seafood that's got a natural form of iodine, not farmed. So yeah, there's research out there. You just, like you said, Heather, you have to verify that it's not quack or,
And I think you also,
Mm.
because it can be overwhelming, especially if you don't feel well. I think you
Mm.
also recruited friends to help you, didn't you?
I did. I called them my contentment circle and my research buddies. So I said, I don't have time to read this report. Can somebody volunteer to read this one and then tell me what it says about this and that? And then if they found something of value that was going, then I would go and I would do a little bit further digging. But I had several friends that were there for me. And we also did contentment circle potluck dinners. So every night before chemotherapy, we'd get together and make great organic food, tasty food, have lots of laughter and good endorphins, good vibes. And then I would go and do the chemotherapy the next day with all this good stuff flowing through me from that circle of friends. It was a lifeline, much like you had all these people checking in on you. I knew that these people were in my corner. And one of them came to every single chemotherapy session to be there with me and Bob. So,
That's outstanding. Yeah, that's so good. There's so many ways to navigate this life, right? There's so many things that can happen, and we all are finding our best way. But
mhm.
if you can surround yourself with some positive, uplifting, helpful, energetic beings, whatever
Yes.
form they take, it just helps you along the way, right?
Yes, it does.
So good. I mean, time flies so fast when I'm talking to my favorite people. Um, but I wanted to give you the opportunity to give, like, if you were going to just have a words of wisdom for our friends who are listening. What would you? I see your trust your first draft. I feel like that's life right there, but that
Yes.
doesn't have to be.
Oh, I think maybe I'll end with one of my favorite quotes. Actually, two, if I may, because they kind of fit
Absolutely.
together for me. As Edward Teller said, when you come to the edge of all that you know and you're about to step off into the unknown, one of two things is bound to happen. Either you will find a soft place to land or you will be taught to fly.
Ooh, I
And
like it.
I loved that one for a very long time. And the other one that is one of my absolute all-time favorites that can really irk some people is by Erica Young. Take control of your own life. A terrible thing happens, no one to blame. That is for me what has given me the freedom to step into my own internal power and passion, is to see that I am part of everything that's happened in my life. I said yes to those relationships. I said yes to letting myself disappear in them. And only when I accepted that accountability was then I was then free to not recreate those scenarios, to not go back and try to heal the relationships that I had with my mother, to keep on recreating those scenarios in real life. I recreated scenarios with my son's father, his personality. I was able to let go of that and find out who I was and what I had done to let that relationship be the way that it was. Out of all the men that I've been in relationship with in my serial monogamy, if we could have had sexual counseling, and if I had been a little bit more of a hard-headed woman, like Cat Stevens says, that, I needed a hard-headed woman, if I'd been
Yeah.
able to stand up to him and not run from conflict, I believe that that relationship would have been the best and the one that I would take back out of all the others,
Wow. Right?
despite the pain that it began in. So,
Yeah. Yeah. And I love the fact that you made the comment that take responsibility for where you are. I mean, stuff does happen to you. I
mhm,
mean, there sometimes you step in it, but it's okay, and it's okay. Wherever you were is okay, and you can't doesn't mean you have to stay there, right? You can
no,
pick.
we can
That's
move.
beautiful. That's fabulous and outstanding. So, in all of the show notes and chat boxes somewhere when people are watching this or listening to this is going to be how to get a hold of you. And I really encourage everyone to go to your um, Global Orgasm Day.
Yes, yes, yes. There'll be an early bird pricing at 47, and closer to the event, it'll be $97. So it'll be, and that information is not yet on my website. I have, the upcoming stage retreat for July and the Writers Lounge, but I'll be getting that up there very shortly. And I have a freebie too on that
Oh,
theme. It's 52 turn on tips. So if people want to reach out for that, I can give you the link that I didn't supply before because I just created it recently. You can sign up and have that
okay.
mailed to you. 52 on tips. So
Absolutely. Well, I will grab it from you and I will make sure we get it posted as well. So,
okay,
this is
wonderful.
good. Thank you so much for your time, for your energy, for everything you share and bring to the world, my friend. I always have such great conversations with you.
Oh,
Uh,
thank you.
thank you. And thanks to all the people out in the world listening. We love you. Um,
We do, we do.
Connect with us if you want to talk some more. All right. Thank you so much. Have a lovely, awesome, outstanding day.
Yes, you too.
Peace.
Bye for now.
Hi, my friend. Thanks so much for listening to this entire podcast. If you found it useful and you're like me and you like helping others, please feel free to share this. Give it a like, give it a comment. If you found something useful in it, there's a chance that someone else will find something useful as well. Also, if you have any questions at all, I can absolutely help and I would love to help. You can email me at heather@prosperityflowcoaching.com. If you want more of this awesome content, you can follow me on Instagram, Heather Stewart Coaching. You can follow me on Facebook, Prosperity Flow Coaching. And I have a personal request. I want to help as many people as I can with these podcasts. And if you could give me a review, hopefully a good one, if you could share, if you could send this out into the world, I would truly appreciate it. I hope you have an amazing day. And I hope that you find your way to wellness by getting back to me. Take care, my friend.